Few words about the term Israel. I understood this morning when we glanced at the news that Israeli incursions have turned into the ground assault. We have no idea what the Israelis have planned. I shared last night what I think from my study of military history would be ideal, and that would be constant small operations for air, land, and sea. No hurry to finish the defeat of Hamas. Time is on Israel's side. As long as the United States stays behind Israel, I personally believe with our family in Israel, as you know, my son Levi Yitzchak lives up north, pretty far from the borders. Our two daughters, however, live in Tel Aviv, which is under rocket attack as we speak. Many of their friends are in the reserves, as is my wife's nephew. We believe the Israelis have the no choice, and therefore the fortitude to never let October 7th ever happen again, and therefore Hamas must be defeated. Every part of me wants to stop this broadcast and go affixed to the news. I know I won't know much more than I'm sharing with you, but I believe we have a very holy duty as we gather today, as long as we gather, and that is to know that our work here in the United States, the Jewish community, and any in the non-Jewish community that understand what's at stake, either because of the love of Israel or the love of Western democracy, love of Western civilization, and I'm not exaggerating. We have great work to do because there's been a movement afoot in our country under our noses in what I'm going to call the radical ideological left, not the political left. I have strong roots in the political left. I say many of my values come from the political left. Great focus on the marginalized, the vulnerable, minorities, etc., for full inclusion in all the goods, rights, and privileges of American society. Those very much are my values. The radical ideological left does not care about anything but hatred. If you look in the radical ideological left, it's filled with hatred of Israel, hatred of America, hatred of democracy itself, hatred of, it's going to sound astonishing, hatred of white people as a concept, not perhaps all white people in particular. I'm very familiar with the ideology. I studied the ideology. It's an ideology that is fueling what is happening behind the scenes in Hamas, in Al-Qaeda, in Islamic State, and so forth. And it has taken hold in our universities, in our colleges, even in our high schools. It has permeated American society, especially with those under 35 years old, and we have to fight back. Now, we might be the grandparents, the parents, but it has to start with us, and that's why I want to give these talks, because something very great is at stake. As a consequence of the horrible, horrible tragedy that is still shredding our hearts on October 7th and 8th, we have been awakened to a call to action that is a proxy war between, as most of you have read, on one side we have Russia, China, Iran, some forces in Turkey, some forces in the Arab world, in particular the radical ideologies of Hezbollah and Hamas to destroy the state of Israel and murder every Jew. This has been brewing for a long time in our country, and we have to start push back. It's going to be a long, difficult struggle, but we have to commit ourselves to our struggle. Our Haftarah selection for today was about exhaustion, about being weary. The rabbis of the Haftarah chose this because they wanted to understand the weariness of Avram in his travelings from Haran to Canaan, and we are also in that state that we have to break through and make this journey to truth. A few words about the word Israel. I saw recently of a clip of a woman who said, Israel has only existed since 1948, and the Palestinians have been there for thousands of years. I thought to myself, how interesting, because 2,000 years ago, the people living in the land of Israel, Judea, were all Jews. So anybody who says, my people has been there for thousands of years, that means they're Jewish. Now, by the way, it could be that many of the people who call themselves Palestinian are descendants of Jews, but 2,000 years ago, there was a Jewish state called Judea. Prior to that, if you look to the biblical period, it was called Israel. Now, where does the term Israel come from? We often teach, I would say almost universally teach, from the story when Jacob's name is changed to Israel in Genesis chapter 32. The author says Jacob's name is changed because Kisarita im Elohim va'anashim v'tuchal. You have struggled with the forces, divine and mortal, and you have prevailed. We don't know when that was written, but if you ask a biblical scholar from internal linguistic evidence, that beautiful, beautiful, archetypally rich story probably was written sometime in the 7th, 8th century BCE. It's not the real etymology of the term Israel. Yisra means to be victorious or to prevail. For example, the Hebrew word sar, a minister, is from the word sarah, sin, resh, he. Clearly, the name Sarah, the wife of Abraham, and that's oftentimes translated as priestess, a woman in some position of great authority in ancient times. So sar means someone in authority, someone victorious. Yisra is a future ongoing. Yisrael means something like, may God be our champion, may God be victorious. Yisrael, victorious divine. Now, since everybody knows this, it then becomes a subject of folklore where Jacob's name is changed to Israel because of his struggle with the angel. I've taught that my whole life. I wish I would have said instead the term Israel as the name of the people, and eventually the name given to the land of Canaan once it came under the control of the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. And then it was used in a somewhat playful way in the story of Jacob. So when did Canaan become Israel? Remember, the land was called Canaan. By the way, where is the word Canaan from? I think I mentioned this earlier. To the degree that we understand ancient languages, in Hebrew, the shoresh, the verb root, kuf nun ayin, kana, means to submit or surrender. If you look in the story of Noah, that Noah's grandson, Canaan, was cursed in some very odd mythological way and said that his descendants will be servants. It could be that Canaan, being a very weak region, on one side Egypt, on one side Mesopotamia, was a place where slaves were captured. For example, the Slavic world today actually comes from the word slave. We don't know for sure. There is a region called Canaan, and again, it might be named that because great powers went and captured slaves from there. That should not be too astonishing because, as you know, a Canaanite tribe called the Hebrews ended up being enslaved in Egypt. That would fit this narrative. Came out of Egypt back to Canaan. Now we're going to call that the world of the Slavs. You'll understand that's a metaphor. And then when they took control of the world of the Slavs, as it were, and again, I'm resting on some good biblical understanding of languages. Not all scholars agree. I'm just going to present this as a strong possibility. They got rid of the word Canaan, and they introduced the word God is victorious because they were victorious in being able to escape from Egypt and victorious over the forces in Canaan. And you can see all this in the book of Judges. And eventually were able to take control of the land and establish it as a land of, ideally a land of justice and the worship of the one God. You see in the book of Joshua, the land is called Israel. You see in other texts that the name of the land is Israel. The name of the people are Israel. They're together. When does it become Judea? Well, the United Kingdom of Israel, according to the Bible, is rent in two after the time of King Solomon. The northern region, the 10 northern tribes, call themselves Israel, the kingdom of Israel. The southern two tribes, Judah and Benjamin, call themselves the kingdom of Judah. So for a few hundred years, you had two kingdoms right next to each other, one in the north, one in the south. The north was called Israel. The south was called Judah or Judea, Yehudah. In 722 BCE, the Assyrians attacked northern Israel. The 10 northern tribes are captured and dispersed. And all you have left is the southern kingdom of Judah or Yehudah or Judea, and therefore the term Jew. The word Jew means Judean, someone descended from the Judeans. If you hear the word Jew, think Judean, Yehudi in Hebrew. Judea is captured by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, taken off into Babylonian captivity. The Persians conquer the Babylonians, and then the Judeans are permitted to return and reestablish the kingdom of Judea, Yahud in Persian, and the city Jerusalem is rebuilt. So now the people of Israel, you might say as a biblical concept, become the Jews or the Yehudim in history. It's the same thing. In fact, sometimes when I talk about the Jewish people, I like to say the people of Israel, because that's our theological name. The word Jew or Yehudi means those who are descendant from the Judeans and those who have voluntarily joined in with the community of Judeans. We typically call those people converts to Judaism. But remember, Judaism is not the religion of the Jews. Judaism is the creation of the Jewish people. First, there's the Yehudim. The Yehudim create Yahadut, not that there's a religion that then people who join it are called the Yehudim. So most primarily are Yehudim or Yehudis or Jews, theologically the Israelites. The land is called Judea, the people of Israel living in the land of Israel, but politically known as Judea, until about 135 CE, after two rebellions against the Romans want to erase the name Judea, erase the memory of the Yehudim, of the Jews, erase the idea of the nation of Israel. They call it Syria Palestina. Where does Palestina come? It comes from a region in southwest land of Israel that was created by the Plishtim. If you look up Palestine, Palestinian, you'll see it's from the word Paleshet, named after what many call them the sea people or the invaders from North Africa or the Mediterranean, who established 5 cities in southwest, what we would call the land of Israel. When the Romans wanted to erase the term Judea, they took that small section in southwest Israel called Paleshet. They took their name and superimposed it upon Judea and the land of Israel. And the Romans used Syria Palestina or Palestina to name a region under Roman rule. So remember always, Palestina is a term created by the Romans to name an administrative district. If one wants to ask, well, who were the Palestinians? Judeans. Judeans lived in the land. If anybody says, where did the Palestinians come from? The original Palestinians were Judeans. They had their names, the name of the land changed by the Romans. The fact that the Romans changed the name of the region to Palestina did not erase the identity of the people who lived there, called the Yehudim or the Jews. It's a complex history after that, but eventually Jewish presence in Palestina was diminished, and the land became Christian under the Byzantine Empire, the East Roman Empire that had its capital in Constantinople. So remember, Palestina is a region that used to be called Judea. Its original inhabitants were the Judeans, the Israelites, and way before that, the Canaanites, and we have no idea what happened to the different Canaanite peoples. Where does the word Palestine come from? The Romans took a small region of the land of Israel called Paleshet, and they superimposed that name upon the region that was called Palestine. As I mentioned last night, the region is under the Byzantine control until you had the invasion out of Saudi Arabia, out of Arabia in the late 600s. We have evidence that there were settlers, as it were colonists, came out of Arabia, settled in the land, and eventually the land went from Greek-speaking to Arabic-speaking, went from Christian to Islam. And so if one wants to talk about, and again, I would never use these words before because I just think this is the nature of history. But if you want to know, when was there an invasion? When was the eradication of a local culture? When was the superimposition of a foreign culture onto a local culture? The erasure of a language, the erasure of a religion. It happened in the Arab conquest of Palestine, the region called Palestine, in the late 600s. So if anybody says colonizer, settler, let's look at the Romans. You can go all the way back to the original Israelites, by the way, in Canaan, but where the Canaanites come from. So when one goes through world history, there's constant migration, conquest, and so forth. And as you know, eventually the Arab invasion supplants the Byzantine East Roman Empire. The Turks then take it over from the Arabs. They're Muslim, but they're not Arabs. And the Turks, again, use the term Palestine as a regional district. You can all look up maps of Palestine through the ages. It's easy to find on the internet. And you'll see the area called Palestine shifted according to how the Turks wanted to administer the region. By the way, there were other Turkish language groups that took over. The history is very complex. I won't go into it now. But sometimes you had the district of Damascus, the district of Hebron, the district of Jerusalem, the district of Akko. Palestine was a district, an administrative district, that did not name a people, but named a region where different people lived. So where did Israel come from? It was the first, what I'll call theological name of the area of Canaan. So the land of Canaan, Canaan, became the land of Israel, ruled by the Israelites, eventually the Judeans, and the Romans took that name away, gave the region the name Palestine. Who are the original inhabitants of Palestine? The Judeans. So if anybody says Palestine is thousands of years old, and a person says, my people have been there for thousands of years, if you ever hear that, I saw it on a little video clip, I wanted to say to the person, so you're Jewish. So come home to your people. Of course, I wouldn't say that to anybody, but notice the kind of chicanery in the language. We've been there for thousands of years. There's no such thing called a Palestinian people. They are inhabitants of the region. When does the idea of Palestinian people come into being? Around 1900. Arabs in the land self-consciously call themselves Palestinian, probably because of the arrival of the Jews of Zionists in force in the second Aliyah.